Norwegians celebrate like crazy.
And we are rolling on May 17th, 2017, where it's a beautiful day in Los Angeles, 2018, where the sunshine is shining and the debaters have promised to speak up so that they will be heard today very audibly. Look at the beautiful campus we have here at UCLA. Isn't it fortunate we're not on the East Coast? Yes, it is. And today we're going to debate the question on climate change. Very important question, because there is a common belief in the world and in the United States that hurricanes and other extreme weather events, which had more on the topic when it was originally listed, are imminent consequences of global warming. Hurricanes and other extreme weather events are imminent consequences of global warming. And speaking for the affirmative is Malik. So let's hear from Malik for a speech not to exceed 7 minutes in length.
Hi everyone, my name is Malik and today's topic is
Malik.
Hi. And today's topic is hurricanes and other extreme weather events such as tornadoes, a severe rise in sea levels, sea surface temperature rise, droughts, floods, wildfires, etc. are eminent consequences of global warming. As this is a fact debate that concerns a factual claim, our team believes that the criteria must be the prevalence of relevant scientific evidence. So I think the clarification and definition of certain key definitions is necessary. Imminent means likely to occur at any moment or about to happen. Extreme meaning reaching its highest or the high degree, the utmost. Consequences is a result or effect of an action or a condition. Substantial means of considerable importance, size, or worth. Our burden of proof lies within the fact that we have to prove a direct linkage between global warming and these extreme climatic events. Now, we understand that these events, hurricanes, tornadoes, etc., are naturally occurring as part of Earth's cycles, but we are arguing that their extremity, frequency, increased duration is caused by global warming. Our first argument is global warming is causing a rise in sea surface temperatures, sea level, and water vapor. According to the EPA and the NOAA, there has been a rise in sea surface temperature by 0.13 degrees Fahrenheit every decade for the past 3 decades. Now that might not seem a lot, but it is. And so the oceans have been heating up since 1992, and they have been absorbing 90% of the greenhouse gases that have been released into the air by human activity. According to a graph on the Earth and Space Science News by Li Jingsheng in 2017, who is a research scientist at the Institute of Atmospheric Physics, he states that there is a direct correlation between the increase of carbon dioxide in the air and ocean heating. Sea level rise is also directly linked to global warming. According to the NOAA again, in a 2017 report, sea levels continue to rise at a rate of over 3.4 millimeters per year due to a combination of melting glaciers and ice sheets and thermal expansion of seawater as it forms. Again, the rise in sea levels is linked to 3 factors, all of which are related to global warming. Thermal expansion, melting glaciers and polar ice caps, and ice loss from Greenland and Antarctica, which have been linked to human activity. And we agree again that along with the scientific community, that sea levels have fallen and risen across Earth's history. However, they have departed from the average rate and are rising more rapidly in the 21st century. And water vapor levels have also been rising. According to a NASA study, the warming brought about by increased carbon dioxide allows more water vapor to enter into the atmosphere. Our second argument is that human activity is directly correlated to an increase of storms, hurricanes, droughts, and fires. Beginning with sea temperature increase, we understand that storms feed off of heat. So the warmer the ocean is, the more exacerbated a storm will be. According to a NASA study based on 2 decades of satellite altimeter data, it linked sea rising levels, and especially Sandy, as a direct correlation between global warming and storm damage. In a 2013 study, they found that extreme rainfall is happening 30% more often, and scientist William Luau from NASA's Goddard Space Flight Center concludes that rainfall in the Atlantic has risen 24% since 1988. The lack of moisture also, because of higher temperatures in the air, is associated with more fires and droughts. We in California are no stranger to drought conditions and disastrous consequences of droughts. So according to Ben Bondlin-Birdie, an ecosystem ecologist at the Joint Global Change Research Institute, he states that a decrease in soil respiration is consistent with the acceleration of carbon dioxide in the air, which has been linked to human activity. So this means that the rise in temperature means less soil, which leads to stuff such as trees, bushes, etc., just burning. And our third argument is increased frequency, duration, and extremity of these climatic events is directly correlated to global warming. According to the NOAA, 2017 witnessed 17 storms, of which 6 were Category 3 or higher. Irma had 185 mile per hour winds. Jose had 155 mile per hour wind. The study, the NHC states that hurricane activity was well above average, the average being 13 storms per year and 3 major storms above Category 3 or higher. The U.S. National Climate Assessment indicating that 2017 was the most active on record, and that there has been a substantial increase, which I quote, substantial increase in the intensity, duration, and frequency in the Atlantic hurricanes since the 1980s, which is linked to higher sea surface temperatures, which is linked to human activity. In a study conducted by the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences of the United States of America, it shows that hurricanes intensify significantly faster now than they did 25 years ago. It showed that the risk of a Hurricane Katrina level storm rose 2 to 7 times more for every 1.8 degree Fahrenheit in sea surface temperature increase. They estimated that there will be a double of such events associated with warming. And again, this just confirmed that this increase in sea level temperatures is linked to an increase in stronger Atlantic.
1 minute left.
Carrie Emanuel, a co-director of the Lawrence Center at MIT, concludes that storm strength will continue to increase as the climate warms. He states that while Hurricane Harvey events would be a 1 in an 800 kind of event, they're now a 1 in 80 type of event. And he also found that Atlantic hurricanes are 60% more stronger than they were in the 1970s. And lastly, the rise in temperatures will increase the frequency of droughts, heat waves, and wildfires. According to a PNS scholarly article, natural cycles as well as human activities can influence the likelihood of wildfires, and these are projected to increase as climate increases. In a 2018 study published by the Environmental Research Ledgers, found that there will be an increase in heat waves, floods, and droughts across 571 European cities as a result of human activity. I now stand open for questions and for clarification.
Thank you very much. Come to the front of the podium. The chair will now hear a cross-examination of 2 minutes. Okay.
Awesome. Okay, so for the resolutional analysis, just to clarify and make sure, if as the negative, we can give the audience reasonable doubt for this statement and show that you can't be so confident of this quote-unquote direct linkage, can the negation thus win the debate?
Our burden of proof, we recognize that these are natural cycles that occur. What we are arguing is the extreme part
I'm
of
just saying
the
like,
topic.
like to win, we just have to prove that there isn't this like direct linkage and there's doubt, just to like clarify.
Well, you have to prove that their extremity is not linked to global warming, that it's linked to something else, because we do recognize that they are naturally occurring.
Right. Okay. Cool. And contention 2, when you gave the source about the 2013 study showing that rainfall is happening and so on, is there a source for that one, or like where did the study come from?
That comes from the Earth Observatory, NASA, that was published in March 5th, 2013.
Thank you.
I have the link on the brief.
Thank you. And then in 2017, when you said that it was like the most active hurricane year, who said it was the most active? And are there certain statistics to prove that it's the most active?
The NHC, in their monthly summary, which is updated every month, stated that 2017 was the most active on record.
Are there statistics, or is it just like a statement?
It is. There are statistics. There's a huge graph on their on the link that I posted that indicates that.
Okay. And then when you say that many like organizations have these future predictions about global warming, they're probably using these climate models. How accurate are climate models typically?
Well, I mean, climate models are very accurate. They have not proven the most. I'm sorry. So there has been scientific research and these models have been going on for generations, and they're the only way to accurately predict of the future. And so there have been correct links of carbon dioxide increase
Thank you very much. The chair will now hear from the leader of the opposition for her speech not to exceed 7 minutes in length. Thank you very much.
Okay, hello class. My name is Serena.
Hi, Serena.
The topic, as again, I'll state it again, hurricanes and other extreme climate events such as a severe rise in sea levels or tornadoes are imminent consequences of global warming. So for criteria, we propose that the criterion for this round, essentially agreeing with the affirmative, is meaningful evidence, and so the burden of proof, as usual, falls on the proposition. Resolutional analysis on how you should judge this debate. We believe that if the affirmative does not prove beyond reasonable doubt that extreme climate events are imminent consequences of global warming, then they do not win the debate. And so the negation, our part, we must show that these extreme climate events may not be imminent consequences, that you can't confidently say there's this direct linkage. So on to arguments. First, these predictions that they have given with reference to global warming are based on incomplete research. In addition, some of the reports they give even lack experts in the topics that they are publishing. For example, let's look at the IPCC. So what is the IPCC? According to their own website, IPCC is the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. On their website, they write, and I quote, that they are the leading international body for the assessment of climate change. So keyword, leading. Okay, so here's the problem. IPCC reports have many flaws as they have been based on models that are inaccurate. Dr. Patrick Michaels, the director of Cato Institute's Center for the Study of Science, published in 2013, pointed out that 18 separate experiments published since January 2011 show that IPCC's climate models are actually off by 46% when it comes to temperature CO2 sensitivity. Additionally, the IPCC has been showing sea levels rising by 2.3 millimeters a year, but until 2003, when you look at their own satellite-based evidence, there is no upward trend. So here's how it works. In 2003, the graph suddenly tilted upwards because IPCC's favorite experts drew on the finding of a single tide gouge in Hong Kong Harbor, which showed a 2.3 millimeter rise. So IPCC took this entire global sea level projection and then adjusted everything by a corrective factor of 2.3 millimeters. And their own scientists even said, and I quote, that they needed to do this to show a trend. Dr. Warner, former chairman of the INQUA International Commission on Sea Level Change, then reviewed 2 of IPCC's latest reports in 2009 and was astonished to find that not one of their 22 contributing authors on sea levels was a sea level specialist. Not one. So this is why this is important. We've heard about IPCC over and over again in every debate that has gone on before us. In their briefs, in their references, they've cited IPCC 3-4 times. But IPCC claims to be the leading body for assessing climate change. But if IPCC has had so many exposed flaws, and their own scientists even agreed that they changed the statistics and they weren't so correct, how can we be so confident and agree to this very resolution that extreme climate events are imminent consequences to global warming? So my point is, if IPCC has even admitted flaws, we can't be sure that this statement is a fact. Second, my second argument, climate is extremely complicated, making it almost impossible to reduce it to global warming. And the reason for this is we can be found in computer models. So because we can't do multiple trials to pinpoint the exact consequences of different climate events, because we only have one Earth and one timeline. You can't do a variety of trials. Scientists will need to rely on computer models to mimic variables on Earth. But these climate models are insufficient, which is a question that I brought up during cross-examination. Adam Stossler, a senior research scientist at the Center for Global Change Science, which is published in 2017, said that capturing extreme weather events are more challenging because they're rare, localized, and brought about by a swirling mixture of environmental factors. Currently, most climate models operate at a fairly coarse scale due to the limitation of supercomputing power. The World Climate Research Program even admitted in their 2016 report, and I quote, "There is a lack of understanding in the types of events that current models can provide credible and robust simulations for. The ability of models to simulate particularly small-scale extremes depends on resolution, and sometimes they even require downscaling." So we can see that this isn't the most accurate. When looking at the summary for policymakers, which is a document provided by the IPCC themselves admitted that one, global warming occurred much slower than they previously forecasted, and two, their computer models have predicted twice as much global warming than that has occurred in the real world. And none of their own computer models were able to replicate or account for the recent lack of global warming. And this is what they said verbatim. So this simply shows we cannot be confident in these computer models. Argument 3. Regardless, we can still look towards the argument of hurricanes, which is the first event that was listed in the resolution. According to the National Hurricane Center, storms are no more intense or frequent worldwide than they have been in the 1850s. Temperatures were high in the 1920s, they were high in the 1930s, and there was much less CO2 atmosphere then. According to BBC, published in December 30th, 2017, the year 2017 was actually not the worst year when comparing hurricanes, and I have statistics to prove this. Hurricane Allen in 1980 actually produced the most storms. And in terms of the most active hurricane year, I have statistics for this. 2017 only had 11 named storms and 6 major hurricanes. 2005 had 28 named storms and 7 major hurricanes. Argument 4. There are insufficient arguments to prove that the rise in tornadoes, which is what they mentioned as well, are due to global warming. The Union of Concerned Scientists, published on June 17, 2011, says, "Scientists don't have robust enough data to determine whether and how..." What, did you say again?
1 minute.
Thank you. How climate change may be affecting tornado frequency. The trend of increasing tornadoes may actually have more to do with how tornadoes are tracked and reported, rather than how many are actually forming. The National Climatic Data Center, published in 2013, agrees and says, "There has been little trend in the frequency of the stronger tornadoes over the past 55 years. Once we account for the apparent increase in tornado counts that are due to much improved technology for identifying them, tornadoes occur no more frequently now than in the past." So as a result of the observations and the facts contained in this specific brief, I believe that the criteria of preponderance of evidence in favor of the opposition has been satisfied, and I now stand open for questions and points of clarification. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Chair will now hear a 2-minute cross-examination. Please come to the front of the podium. Thank you. Wrong way.
So you state that there has been a decrease in hurricanes in one of your articles. I looked at it.
Oh, I don't think I said there was a decrease. I just said they're no more intense or frequent than they have been in 1850s.
So there has been a decrease in their frequency and their extremity since the 1850s.
Oh, not that there isn't decrease, but they're not like more frequent.
But the same article states that there will be likely more intense hurricanes that carry higher wind speeds and more precipitation as a result of global warming. Are you aware of that?
Your statistic, right?
No, that's from your article that you gave us, and that's where you got your information from.
Wait, mine is literally right here.
Yeah, I looked into that, and it says
Okay,
that.
which article are you talking about? The IPCC, the National Hurricane?
So it says that. Do you have any statistics to back that up, since you said that you do have?
1 minute left.
that there's, yeah, like, for example, if you look at 2005.
Serena, hold your paper down a little.
Oh,
It's
in
blocking your
2005,
face.
you mentioned that. In 2005, I pointed out that they had more hurricanes and more storms compared to 2017, and I gave a statistic on that. And I also proved that Hurricane Allen had the strongest storms based on the number of storms and hurricanes.
Okay. And also the questioning of credibility, the credibility of climate models will not be given adherence by the affirmative. But the article that you cited in regards to the insufficiency of models also includes that, as quoted by the same author that you used, the consensus among scientists is getting stronger and stronger. Are you aware of that?
But even if they're getting stronger and stronger, you can't, first of all, you can't quantify that. That's just like a quote from somebody. And at the same time, I've proven with statistics that they are inaccurate multiple times throughout the case. So I don't think it's fair to just dismiss that based on a quote.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. The chair will now hear the member of the government for his speech not to exceed 7 minutes in length. Begin, good sir. Yes. There you go. Okay.
We done?
Yes, we be ready.
Good afternoon. Before I begin, I would like to reinstate that the criteria of this debate is the prevalence of relevant scientific evidence. I will now go into further details on the contentions the Prime Minister presented. First of all, global warming causes an increase in sea level temperature, rise in sea level, and water vapor. Why is this important? Well, we have already stated that oceans absorb more than 90% of emissions from human activities. More than 90%. This is according to the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Association. This is a very, very, very large number and should not be ignored. What has this resulted in? This has resulted in an increase of 1.6 degrees Fahrenheit over the past century. While this may not sound like a lot, I will later explain why this is, in fact, a lot. And according to the EPA, in a study published in 2016, sea level temperatures are now the highest they have ever been since reliable measurements started. And according to Lian Cheng, a research scientist at the Institute of Atmospheric Physics, the oceans give us much better measurements than land could ever give us because of their sheer size, and because of their sheer size, they take slower to adopt, which gives us clearer signs in how the climate is trending. So what about sea level rise? Well, we've already talked about how sea levels have risen by about 8 inches. What is the projection? The projection is that the sea levels will continue to rise another 1 to 4 foot by 2100. Be observed that even some say that the 4-foot measurement is a bit conservative, and it could clearly go over that. The effects of this is, according to the IPCC, more than a 400% increase in people that are at the risk of flooding. Once again, a 400% increase. And what about water vapor? Well, we all know that water vapor is a very prominent gas in the atmosphere. And the scientific relationship between water vapor and global warming comes in the form that an atmosphere of a higher temperature can hold more water vapor. Water vapor can easily be converted into other forms of energy. And this is according to a study reported by the National Climate Assessment in 2014, a study ordered by Congress to get the absolute latest and most reliable information on climate change. So oceans, there has been a lot of focus on the oceans, and that focus is merited. Why? Because the amount of energy stored in our oceans clearly exceeds the total amount of energy stored in the atmosphere. This 1.6 Fahrenheit degree increase in temperature of the oceans corresponds to an energy level that is equal to 1 billion times the amount of energy released by the nuclear bombs over Hiroshima and Nagasaki during World War II. And this is according to a special report made by The Economist earlier this year. And even if they want to question that number, it's very important to remember the first law of thermodynamics, that energy can neither be created nor destroyed. Energy can only be transferred. This means that this energy that we have added into the oceans will come back in one way or another. And this correlates to our next argument, that human activity is directly correlated to an increase in storms, hurricanes, droughts, and fires. When it comes to hurricanes, the most important component of hurricanes is warm, moist water. If you do not have warm water, you cannot have hurricanes. This is why hurricanes are geographically locked on our Earth, or I should say, have so far been. And this is according to NASA. More so, the severity and frequency of droughts are also directly correlated to global warming. Droughts are, as you all are aware, caused by two factors: the lack of precipitation and high temperatures, because high temperatures cause more evaporation. And while it may seem strange that the National Climate Assessment claims that precipitation in the United States has actually increased since the year 1900, this is not weird at all, because what global warming does is that it makes wetter area wetter and more dry areas even drier. Precipitation comes in fewer events, but they are more hardcore. According to a study in June of 2013, in the study of Bulletin of American Meteorological Society, global warming has led to an increase in heat waves and droughts and a reduction in cold waves. Temperature is moving to a hotter level. This leads to faster evaporation, primarily in the areas that are already facing high evaporation. States like California have seen what this causes. And when the temperature reaches certain temperatures, we're not only seeing evaporation directly from water sources, we're also seeing soil evaporation. This will have consequences for agriculture around the world. And according to Björn Lomborg and the Skeptical Environmentalist, developing countries, the countries that do not have the money to deal with these, will suffer the main consequences of this. He, however, assumes that richer, more developed countries will be able to handle this cost. I consider that to be very, very uncertain. So extreme weather events have become more frequent and more extreme. According to a study published in the Nature Geoscience in 2012, tree ring data suggests that the drought over the last decade here in the United States, in the western United States, represented the driest conditions in 800 years. This is quite severe. And in these conditions, human mistakes become costly. If anyone has ever been camping in the rain, they know that lighting a fire using wet wood is quite hard. Dry old wood, very easy. European research from earlier this year shows that all major cities in Europe are either at the risk of droughts, floods, or other extreme weather events. More so, a study in the Journal of Climate in 2012 by Thomas Knudsen at the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Association expect hurricanes to become more frequent, especially the stronger ones. This is backed up by the National Climate Assessments, and this will be further costly since we build larger cities closer to water. More so, according to Dr. Emanuel at MIT, the risk of events such as intense as Hurricane Harvey are bound to increase by 1,800% before the end of this century compared to the probability of these events in the 1990s. Finally, tornadoes. Tornadoes, like hurricanes, are dependent on warm, moist air, something that increased due to global warming, and this increase in warm, moist air will overpower any possible decrease in wind shear caused by global warming. On balance, the government has successfully presented a preponderance of relevant evidence in favor of the proposition. Thank you. And now stand open to further points of clarification.
Thank you very much. Let us now come to the front of the podium and engage in cross-examination. Step that way.
Yeah, a little bit.
You can step that way just a touch.
I
Yeah.
like the couple.
You like the comfy look. Good, okay. We're
All right, so
good.
early on in your case, you mentioned
Hold your
that.
paper down so I see your face. Yeah.
So early on in your case, you mentioned that reliable measurements have shown, or since reliable measurements have become more prevalent in scientific research,
Yes.
that sea levels have been shown to rise, correct?
Yes.
When did reliable measurements
1880.
What exactly made measurements more
Technological
reliable?
improvements.
Do you have any examples of
They're
these?
cited in the information provided in my.
Okay, so earlier you mentioned also, I think later in your third contention, European research that suggests the increase of storms. I might be misremembering.
No, the increased probability and that cities in Europe are at the risk of extreme weather events.
Do you have a source for that?
Yes,
research?
it's cited.
Oh, okay, because I think I just heard European research, but we can move on. So do you believe that current methods for measuring climate events are completely accurate as of right now?
I believe that as with everything in human life, they will become more accurate in time. I believe that we are currently at a step where there are reasons to question it, but in most time, meta-analysis proves that they're correct.
Okay. Do you believe that the results of, in terms of heating, global heating, and global sea levels, that those are all completely accurate, or that we should take those as truth for now?
They are accurate.
Okay. Earlier you mentioned that wildfire severity increases, or has increased. Is that correct?
As in that due to higher temperatures, the risk of them are increasing, yes.
The risk of wildfires are increasing because of higher temperatures?
The
Okay.
severity of them are then caused by human factors, as how quickly they can be combated and so on.
Okay, and so last question. Do you believe that the IPCC is the most reliable and most credible source in terms of following any developments with climate research?
I believe that is something that the scientific consensus have said and that a lot of governments around the world believe.
Okay, and that is the evidence that you're basing a majority, not a majority,
No,
but
only,
a lot.
there was one contention that
Okay.
was based on IPCC evidence.
Okay, all right, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chen. And now we will hear the member of the opposition for his constructive speech not to exceed 7 minutes in length.
So just for a quick roadmap, I'm going to be providing a negative constructive that more or less expands upon my partner's case, and if time permits, I'm going to be moving on to reputations. So again, the resolution today is that hurricanes and other extreme climate events such as the severe rise in sea levels, tornadoes, are imminent consequences of global warming. Again, we agree with our opponent's definitions, and that we believe that the resolutional analysis for this round should be based off of whether or not the affirmative can provide beyond a reasonable doubt that global warming directly causes these events. So, contention 1. These predictions with reference to global warming are based on incomplete research. Current climate models do not accurately capture extreme climate events such as hurricanes. Climate models are limited by computational power, which limits the depth of the conclusions. The following is from an article from Smithsonian Magazine, the official journal published by the Smithsonian Institute in Washington, D.C., and this article was posted on August 15th of 2017. A climate model works by dividing the Earth's atmosphere and surface into a grid, like the lines of latitude and longitude on a globe. This comes from Adam Schlosser, a senior research scientist at the Center for Global Change Science. The model has to break up space into chunks. The smaller the chunks, the more precise the model will be. But extreme weather events are more challenging because they're rare, localized, and brought about by a swirling mixture of environmental factors. Currently, most climate models operate at a fairly coarse scale due to limitations of supercomputing power, Schlosser says. Although climate models can capture large regional events, like the affirmative has brought up, like heat waves and larger scale events such as that, data gathered on the occurrence of weather events is limited by computational capacity. This suggests that the results of extreme weather event models are incomplete. Secondly, certain statistical analysis methods used by climate scientists today detect outliers and do not show a causation. Earlier they had mentioned that European research suggests a rise in certain climate events. However, the following was written by Mike Hume and published on June 5th, 2014. Hume is a professor of human geography in the Department of Geography at the University of Cambridge. One of the approaches is a classical statistical analysis of meteorological time series data to determine whether a particular weather or climatic extreme falls outside the range of what a normal climate might have delivered. This was the approach used in a study in 2003 to suggest that European heat waves, or to suggest that Europe was going through a large heat wave. However, 10 years later, research showed that not only was their methodology flawed, but that it showed incorrect data. The difficulties of such an approach are revealed in a later study by Charpenter in 2011. All such extreme event analysis of meteorological time series are at best able to detect outliers, but can never be decisive about possible causes. This approach is able to attribute statistically a trend in extreme weather to human influence, but not a specific weather event. Again, the extreme weather blame question remains undetermined. Climate and climate event research methodology is chock full of logistical flaws that have skewed the results of these studies. The fact that it took 8 years in order for correction to be made to the 2003 European study suggests that we should not take climate-based research results as fact immediately. Third, there's uncertainty as to how currently unresearched areas would affect climate models, especially in the context of attribution. The following was published on March 16, 2017, and is a collaborative analysis from the Center for Weather and Climate and the National Centers for Environmental Information. Incomplete spatial coverage of observing stations for a region or the globe is another potential source of uncertainty. Since there are a number of regions in the world that are not covered in global scale data sets used for climate analysis, particularly for extremes, it is unknown how the addition of these regions would impact detection and attribution studies. Even in regions that have observing stations, the question of lower spatial density could prove problematic. So, in summary, there are so many undiscovered facets of the globe that could potentially change what current climate data shows, similar to the previously mentioned European study. Unknowns in scientific research is synonymous with uncertainties, which again, if there are any uncertainties with the affirmative case, then you cannot vote for affirmative. Contention 2. Climate is extremely complicated, making it impossible to reduce to simply global warming. First, climate estimations are based off of inaccurate models. Thus, predictions based off of these models may also be inaccurate. Temperature predictions have consistently been wrong with these climate models. The following is from an article written by David R. Henderson and Charles L. Hooper on April 4th of 2017 for the Hoover Institution. The ultimate test for a climate model is the accuracy of its predictions, but the models predicted that there would be a greater warming between 1998 and 2014 than actually happened. A mere 2.4% of the predictions undershot actual temperatures and 96.6% overshot, according to Cato Institute climatologist Patrick Michaels, which my partner brought up earlier. Climate models as a group have been running hot, predicting about 2.2 times as much warming as actually occurred between 1998 to 2014. So, the impact of this is that extreme climate conclusions based off of current contemporary climate model predictions are faulty at best. And if my opponents have any evidence based off of these climate models, then we have to take into account that their conclusions may also be wrong. Secondly, new reports have confirmed climate model inaccuracy, revealing incorrect warming. Again, the following is from an article published by Natural Geoscience on September 18, 2017. The climate models have overestimated the amount of global warming and failed to predict what climatologists call the warming hiatus, over 20 years of almost no change in temperatures. The report, published in the journal Natural Science on September 18, acknowledges that most of the models of warming trends fails to predict the slowdown and warming post-2000, resulting in less pronounced warming than predicted, and thus more room in the CO2 emissions budget for the coming decades. The IPCC models overestimated temperature increases, consequently setting key benchmarks for warming earlier than they need to be, given the actual numbers. So in summary, again, current models overestimate warming based on empirical evidence. Any and all extreme climate predictions based off of these models must be approached with caution. So on balance, the negative has been able to demonstrate that climate research, especially in the context of extreme climate events, suffers from severe logistical flaws. Research is either incomplete or incorrect, and a distinct connection between global warming and extreme climate events is probable at best. However, the affirmative has failed to uphold the burden of this debate, which is to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that these events are a direct result of global warming. I'm now open for cross-examination and points of clarification.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chen.
Early on in your speech, you quote an article from the Smithsonian. The same article also states that warming from human emissions have doubled the risk of extreme weather events. Thanks to advances in supercomputing and pooling hundreds of climate models developed by researchers across the world, they are also more statistically confident than ever in saying that these intense storm, droughts, and record-break heating waves are occurring with the increased frequency because of humans. Are you aware of this?
Yes, but even despite the fact that, yes, scientists are becoming more confident in their models, that isn't to say that the models are completely accurate or that they will be accurate in, let's say, 10 years.
But you agree that these points brought forward to the evidence you have cited are in support of the proposition?
The article that I had cited was it was a collaborative effort of many different sources. So I was quoting, yes, one person in that article, and
But isn't quoting just one part rather than the whole part of the article a bit of lying, scientific lying in a sense?
not necessarily. I believe that if I do have a credible source within another source, that I can quote that person, and I don't have to necessarily represent the entire article.
All right, in terms of credibility, you quoted David R. Henderson.
Correct.
And what is Mr. Henderson's profession?
Sorry about that. Let me go ahead and find that for you. Do you remember what contention that is?
That is.
Oh yeah. So David R. Henderson, he's a research fellow at the Hoover Institution, which is an
What
American.
is his research?
So the Hoover Institution is an American public policy think tank and research institution located at.
Since you don't want to answer the question, I'll answer it for
okay.
you. He's a professor of economics, and the Hoover Research Institute deals with economic prosperity. Isn't there a chance that while dealing with economic prosperity, one will downvalue the risk of climate change in order to suggest more laissez-faire economic policies?
Not necessarily. It's a fact that current climate models have been proven to be incorrect, and if an economist can write about that and it's true, then I don't see why there's a problem with his credibility in this case.
But your sources of... we're done.
We're done. Thank you so much. And now it's time for those infamous rebuttals that I'm so proud of that have 4 steps of refutation. He said, I disagree, because, therefore. Maybe we could all say it aloud with them, yes, and see them repeated, yes. And I need a moment to focus the camera, please. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. Okay. I be focused. Nice loud 2-minute rebuttal, please. Thank you.
Hi everyone, my name is Malik.
I'm Malik.
And I'd like to remind everyone of the topic that is hurricanes and other extreme weather events are imminent consequences of global warming. So they said that they said and they used the NHC statement that there is a decrease in the frequency of hurricanes, which was published in 2014. I disagree because there have been countless updates and publications conducted by the NHC which have shown otherwise. And the same article that they use that statement from also says, and I quote, this is extreme weather event is a phenomenon that is strongly associated with sea surface temperatures. It is reasonable to suggest a strong probability that the increase in storm intensity and climate change are linked. Therefore, this shows the hole in their evidence. They also said, and they quoted the IPCC's claims and reports as their evidence throughout their argument.
1 minute left.
However, nowhere in my argument nor in my brief did I use the IPCC because of its outdated material. And we used up-to-date scientific evidence from the NHC, the NOAA, which has all been 2016 and later. Therefore, this reflects how outdated their arguments are and their scientific evidence. Lastly, they use Henderson's research to refute climate models. We disagree on the accuracy of Henderson's research because he's an economist whose main focus is prompting economic ideas, not the truth behind climate change. And they say that climate models cannot accurately predict the future. I disagree because scientists have been able to predict accurately an increase in atmospheric carbon dioxide, and in 2017 there was a scholarly article that said there has been not much divergence from climate prediction in the 1970s and the development of far-fetched numbers, which shows the hole in their evidence again.
Thank you very much, Malik. Chair will now hear a rebuttal from the opposition not to exceed 2 minutes in length, using the 4 steps of refutation, please. Thank you.
Okay, so to start off, they said that the rise in sea level temperatures were caused by global warming. We disagree because, as mentioned before, IPCC admitted, their own faculty admitted that sea levels, that they were botching numbers for sea levels, and they're the leading body, and they admitted not using that most accurate numbers. So we've proven through our own data that you can't always trust their climate models. Their contention too, they said human activity is correlated to the increase in these events, but we disagree because this is a little bit off topic. You're saying human activity leads to global warming. We're talking about these extreme weather events. Therefore, you should vote for the negation because it is not part of this topic. And for the third contention, they say that extreme weather events are more frequent and extreme. We disagree because, as proven by our own sources, we've shown that there were bigger hurricanes, stronger hurricanes in 2005 and the 1980s. We gave actual statistics. They gave quotes, statements through scientists, a graph supposedly, but we were able to show you through the amount of hurricanes that happened that it's not more frequent or extreme. So IPCC, they mentioned, oh, we didn't say it specifically. However, in your own works cited, I counted 3 times that IPCC was specifically stated. You even admitted in your cross-examination that there is an overall consensus, meaning that the IPCC can be trusted. The IPCC has a general consensus that they are to be trusted. So I don't think you can just dismiss it because you didn't specifically quote it. Yeah, therefore, we can't really be confident of this resolution because of climate models, because of IPCC's own faultiness that they even admitted to, that their own scientists have admitted to. And if we can't be confident of this resolution because of the leading experts' faultiness and lack of accurate information, then there is much doubt in this resolution. We can't claim this as fact, and therefore, I would urge you to vote for the negation who has upholded the criterion. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The chair will now hear the member of the government for his 2 minutes of refutation, which shall have 4 parts. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Their entire claim is based on the fact that they so say that projections are wrong. I disagree because projections are oftentimes quite correct, actually. For example, tornadoes were expected in the 2013 study to increase in the future. 3 years later, when the very claim was researched, that proved to be correct. Therefore, we see another flaw in their argument that projections are often correct. More so, in terms of hurricanes, they said that hurricanes have decreased. I disagree because the intensity of hurricanes have actually increased. For example, Hurricane Harvey produced so much precipitation that the National Meteorological Center had to remake their scales to find room for the precipitation from Hurricane Harvey. This was last year. Therefore, we cannot gain adherence to their arguments. They are using a very minor outlook. The majority of projections are on our side. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. And last but not least, we'll hear a 4-part refutation from the opposition member who will tell us why his side is correct. Begin, Mr.
Alright,
Chen.
so overall in this debate, we can argue whether or not storm intensity has increased or whether or not storm frequency has increased. But that's besides the point. If you look at purely just based off of this debate, it's clear that the negative has misconstrued our arguments and that they've dropped several of our contentions that are very damaging to the case. First up, they conceded the contention that there's a lot of incomplete research. Sure, there is research to suggest that warming is rising, that sea levels are rising, but the fact that there's so many undiscovered areas and the fact that climate models, we're not arguing that projections are wrong, we're arguing that the models that these projections are based off of are wrong. And sure, they can argue that my Hoover evidence is not credible, but I brought up a second piece of evidence from the Natural Geoscience scientific journal that yes, climate models are in fact wrong. So the fact that they haven't addressed this, you can take, the fact that they haven't addressed this, you can vote for the negation right away. But secondly, on balance, the reason why you should vote for the negation is because of the fact that At the beginning of the round, we established that they must prove beyond a reasonable doubt that global warming directly causes an increase in these events. However, if at any point during this debate we've shown you that there is doubt, whether it's doubt that the scientific research conclusions are faulty, or that the scientific research is incomplete, or that the models themselves are just inaccurate as stated by the IPCC themselves and also stated by National Geoscience and other scientific resources, you must vote negative on those 3 claims. Thank you.
Thank you very much. You may now cross the room and congratulate each other on an excellent debate. And now it's time for the audience to individually fill out their ballots.
Imani, on the blue thing, right on top, there's like one ballot. Do you see that? Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, do you want to do that? Oh, do you want to do the honors, or do you want to stay seated?
No, I'll stay seated.
He'll stay seated.
I must admit, I'm somewhat tired of being the one who's shooting.
Okay, he's in there. Okay. The only thing I ask is that I not be in the picture.
Okay.
So, I'm sorry.
No.
Okay.
Thank you. Okay.
The camera adds, what, 10,000? I don't look at it.
You know how to zoom in and all that?
Yeah.
Face close-ups and all that?
I know how to do
Okay,
it.
and I need the ballots, ladies and gentlemen, hobos and tramps. Oh, yeah. You can assist me by. Whatever you do, don't stop it.
Okay.
I want one person doing it. And I can take. Oh, yeah. Yeah, when I'm done doing my job. Can you find the sign-in sheet somewhere?
Pretty. Can you mark everyone who talks?
Oh,
So everyone here.
yeah, here you are. Give it to, that. Okay, may I have the ballots, please? Any more ballots? Yeah, I see more. Anybody have any Scotch tape on it? Oh, stapler. Get out there, get out there. Thank you. Do I have all the ballots? One more, okay. Dude. Next one, that's for being comprehensive. On an 8 to 10 decision. The decision goes to the opposition. And we will start in the rear today with Nilo.
Nilu, but okay.
Nilo, not Nilo. Don't call me Nilo. Nilo. Just don't call me late for dinner, right? Persian dinner. Okay.
So I voted for the government. I ultimately, it was a great debate. Everyone had great eye contact, great points, great reasoning. But I think they did a better job of persuading me. A big part that really helped me make my decision was when they read back you guys' quotes. And it appeared that you guys left stuff out, so it kind of made me question the rest of your briefs, or the rest of your points and how valid they would be. So ultimately, that's why I voted for the government.
Right, let me comment on that. We, for the first or second time, had somebody check the other sources, which I really like. It's a tricky business. He used the word lying, which is a very strong word.
Yeah.
I would discourage you from using that word. I would just say, if it's taken out of context, you can say that. And you can just, especially if the title of the article is global warming continues to be a problem, and they have one sentence that says the opposite, then you can really say the intent of the article was the other way. But when it's a balanced article and they're presenting methodological problems, then it's a different ballgame. Yes, please.
Carolina.
Hi, Carolina.
I voted for the opposition actually, a little bit because of your reasons, but in the country. I thought, especially at first, like your arguments, everyone's like, they're great. But you guys started like refuting their evidence, and it's very hard to be the opposition saying like, oh, like global warming is not helping in these things. But you guys made it like a point to say like it's uncertain, like weather is uncertain, it's predictions for like 20 years, 30 years. It's all very uncertain, you know. So I thought it was like a great argument, and refuting evidence and your claims and everything. I thought you guys did a great job.
Right. I think we saw for the first time someone take, as a good lawyer in the courtroom does, the concept of a reasonable doubt and really hammer it home and have reasonable doubt not just on one issue but 4 issues. And you could go to a lot of places, and she could have even argued more strongly that any one of the 4 was enough to cause you to vote to reject the resolution. She wanted to get real technical about it. So you have to prove all of these, make sure this resolution is true. You have to vote for the resolution in its totality. Yes, please.
I'm Jacob.
Hi, Jacob.
I voted for the negative because I thought their argument was really well-rounded, and I really liked William's speaking was like very clear, kind of to the point. He took time to explain everything, which I really appreciate. And another thing was, they kind of called, I thought the affirmative spent a little too much time on human activities causing global warming, which wasn't the debate topic. And the opposition called them out on that, and they didn't really have an answer for why it was brought up. And so that kind of convinced me.
Okay, thank you, Jacob. Yeah, I thought William, in case you didn't notice it, and I would just say, William's speech, every one of his speeches, he had a little segment at the bottom that said impact. And he explained the impact of the argument, why it was important, what it meant to the resolution. And if you, it's not a bad idea to have it in. I've been screaming at Haley all year to continue to do the baby steps and put in the word my impact is, my claim is, my warrants are, my impact is. Because judges sometimes are morons, and they like to hear that, and then they know, oh, that's the impact, okay. And it's a good thing to do and say. And he had, I wasn't, just to not praise him too much, I wasn't very impressed with his rebuttal, but I thought his construction was very strong. Yes, please.
Hi, Imani.
Hi, Imani.
Hello. I voted for the negative just because it's really difficult to be a negative on like situations like these. I thought y'all like found the most recent like sources that you could, explained them really well where we could really understand them, and really came around full circle. And also because I feel like the affirmatives like cross-examination was a little like harsh with the tone, was like so you know what I'm talking about. But so yeah, that's why I voted for this.
So, did you find it harsh to the point of being offended by it?
No, I wasn't offended, but it
It
was
was
just
a little vague.
you know,
Okay.
like call them liars or lie.
Yeah, I know, I
Whatever.
sat up at that too. I wasn't like
But
gonna
y'all
go
were
and
still-
slap him, but yeah, it was.
Everyone did a great job, you know, it's the only
Okay.
one.
Thank you, Imani. Yes, please.
Hi, my name's Arun.
Hi, Varun.
Arun. One thing I liked across the board is that you guys did a good job in building back up your cases. Like, for example, I thought Serena did a good part taking apart Malik's case, but then Ricard did a good job of building it back up. And likewise, Ricard did a good job of taking apart Serena's case, and William did a good job of building it back up. And then across the board, you guys did a good job of reconstructing your cases during the rebuttals, and you guys also still rebutted other teams' points. I thought that was very effective across the board. One thing you guys can work on, which you guys did improve for your rebuttals, but your constructives were way too scripted, I thought. You guys can definitely be more interactive with the audience. Use more voice inflection. You guys had a good eye contact. More voice inflection can be very powerful in terms of really engaging the audience in such a technical debate with so many boring terms and technical terms. So I ultimately, even though it was very close, as the votes kind of indicated, I ultimately voted for the opposition. And that kind of boiled down to coherence and to overall structure of their arguments. I thought both sides' evidence were very relevant, so you guys both fulfilled criteria. But I would say your guys' case, especially William's off-time roadmap, or I don't know if it was off-time or on time, I thought that was very effective, and it would really clear cut what his argument was going to be in his 7-minute constructive, and what the timeline or kind of order of what you would be presenting. That made it very clear and kind of brought it home, and that's what ultimately swayed me to the opposition. But good job all around.
Yeah, Arun, 2 points that I want to stress that are very important. The roadmap of telling your audience where you're going, what you're going to do, is very helpful. Because they go, oh, okay, I'll be able to follow it then. And the second thing is a little less scripted in the rebuttal and listen to what actually was said and do some thinking on your feet and responding to what was said. Oh, my article, he said it was out of context. No, it wasn't. It was, you know, and answering what was actually argued against you. Yes, please.
So I thought it was really close.
Name?
Cole. So I didn't really choose till the end. I thought Malik had really good deliverance and all your guys' information really easy, like I understand what you're saying. the opposition side. I voted for the opposition in the end just because I thought you guys had. I just agree with your reason of doubt. I just believe that we don't know for sure. And my one critique would be, the opposition would be, maybe you're supposed to do this, but I didn't really like how you were like, oh, if we do this, we win, right? I didn't really like that part. But besides that, I think it was good.
Yeah, we can talk about that a minute. You know, we coach the teams. We try to encourage them to have standards for how to win, and if you follow the criteria, you allegedly supposed to win. And some judges resent that because they want to use their own standards and criteria. But we really do encourage our debaters to say, well, you know, they didn't meet their burden of proof, so they lose, you know. And I see why you would win. By the way, I got a second notice on you from your athletic.
Wow. About what?
You're in the trash can. Go ahead. Yeah.
Hi, I'm Natalie. So ultimately I voted for the opposition. There are things though that I think that both teams did well and things that both teams can work on, so I'm just gonna touch on that a little bit. As for the opposition, I think that you guys clearly explained your sources, even like abbreviations and all. So like I know at the very beginning of your speech today, you talked about the IPPC and like what that actually was, which the affirmative all sees the IPPC, but because the affirmative didn't explain it first, it kind of gave the opposition the power to use the IPPC to like their advantage in explaining what it was and why they could disprove you or approve what they're trying to say. So I think if you're gonna use it, like that's awesome, just like define it. And you guys did use the year, which like was really helpful in clearly seeing your argument and why it was relevant and why it's like the newest piece of information you could get. And then as for the affirmative, I think that just explaining, again, like explaining the abbreviations, explaining who the NOAA is. I know you guys mentioned them quite a few times. And also in saying something like is quite severe, I think that it's good to like emphasize points and give notice to things that are important. But maybe instead of saying it is quite severe, show us why it's quite severe. Like show us the major statistics rather than just saying it out loud, because I feel like that could just be more effective in winning over your audience. Because I think that I was kind of like on the edge of who to vote for, and ultimately I just felt like there were more statistics shown rather than saying that things were severe. But I did feel like the affirmative did a good job of like in your, especially like Malik's rebuttal at the very end, the 4 steps were clear to me, and so I think you guys are.
Thank you.
I'm Tyler. So it was close, but I voted for the affirmative. I think you guys both have really good cases. I know as a negative, it's extremely hard to find an article that totally supports your case. So I think them attacking that was actually a very strong move. You guys have really good evidence and statistics, but I think I heard the word models like probably like 80, 90 times. And it just all kind of like rolled together. I think if you could do a little bit more of like imagery, like what they did, I think Ricard said, he kind of created like a picture of like a nuclear bomb being multiplied 1 billion times and then transferred that into a hurricane, or like into the water, which created a hurricane, which was like a really powerful image. And I think if you guys had more imagery like that, I would have voted for you.
I wanted to ask you, you don't have to answer this if you don't want to. You've never stolen anything. I want to ask you what you thought of the criterion of the reasonable doubt that was argued about, and how they went through all 4 of the things and had the counter evidence and problems with each one of the areas.
I think that was really good. I think that's something I probably could have done better in more debates.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
All right, good.
Sir, could I go now since I have to leave?
Oh, you have a doctor's appointment, that's right, okay. Go ahead, yeah.
Hi, I'm Sydney.
Hi, Sydney.
I thought you guys both did a really great job. Personally, I think the topic is obviously really hard to like argue against, so I definitely commend the opposition for that. I think overall, I kind of like how Richard used analogies, like the wood example. I don't know why, I thought it was interesting he argued it, and it made me understand the issue more. And so because of just the delivery and their ability to bring up your sources during cross-examination, it just made me feel like they were a bit more prepared by reading your sources beforehand. So therefore, I voted for the affirmative. But overall, I think you guys both did a great job, and I was really conflicted. I just kind of went off of, like, you know, points that I just really remembered from the debate.
Yeah, it's good. It's fair. One thing I think for a strategy just for your own, should it happen again, is if someone accuses you, you shouldn't, and I think the member of the opposition did a little better job. You shouldn't seem so surprised or have that deer in the headlight look when you hear that they're quoting your source and quoting the next paragraph. Yeah, I was there. Or what's, you know, I think you heard William say, yeah, he's a professor that, you know, he's at Stanford, so what? You know, so that's a good position. And not be, you know, rattled by being quoted that way. Okay, we are here.
My name is Yassine.
Hi, Yassine.
I ended up voting for the opposition, and that was actually a pretty hard decision because both sides, as everyone said, did really well, presented well, had good evidence. And the affirmative, you guys actually did have a very, very compelling case. And the reason, really the only reason I voted for the opposition as opposed to the affirmative was, and I had to put aside my personal bias when doing this, was that you guys did actually a really good job of putting some doubt in my head as to the validity of the models and what the models say, because everything kind of comes down to these models because we're all just projecting at this point. We don't know, we can't read the future. We don't know exactly what's going to happen. And just kind of like if it was a criminal court case, just that shadow of a doubt kind of became my criteria in the end. And as much as I wanted to believe them, I couldn't get past that sliver of doubt.
I appreciate you being honest and saying, hey, I believe in global warming, it's my Bible, but I went beyond that. I appreciate you saying that. Yes, please.
My name is Ikechi.
Hi, Ikechi.
I voted for the affirmative because I agreed with their points and I feel like they had a good argument, and like all of your evidence seemed to like back up you guys' points. Like I was almost close to voting for the negative though, just because of like what he was saying about like the reasonable doubt thing. But at the end I chose affirmative.
Yeah, it was close. Really close. Yes, sir.
Hi, I'm Frank.
Hi, Frank.
It was hard. You both presented really well, so I had to kind of, well, I mean, you like spoke really well and presented all your information really well, so I had to get into like the nitty gritty of what I thought would be important. And I think the negative was focusing too much on how much the models impacted how extreme it was going to be, or how imminent it was going to be, and not necessarily whether it's going to happen in a modest scale. And because you could argue a modest scale would end up being an extreme impact. So I feel arguing more on like the basic science of it, and the basic science and the basic theory would have been a little bit more helpful, because you need to refute like each part of this, that humans' contribution to global warming, it's imminent to happen, and it's extreme when it does happen. And I feel like it was just a little bit lacking on the humans affecting global warming and that side of it. So yeah, just the specifics of it. I do think when you argue each weather event, I think Serena did a good job arguing the tornado case. I think it needed to be argued a little bit more on the hurricane side of the case, and how just the basic science would like the seawater temperature rising would lead to an increase in hurricane intensity. How just arguing the basic science on that would have been a little better for me. And yeah, that's about it. But you guys both did a really good job. I was impressed by that.
I still don't know how you voted.
Oh, for the affirmative.
The affirmative,
Yeah.
okay, that's what I thought, I put you on the affirmative side, but some of the stuff you were saying sounded like making. Yes, please.
Hi everyone, my name is Danielle.
Hi, Danielle.
This was the hardest debate for me to choose. I eventually went with affirmative. Did you guys state anything about the IPCC?
Once.
Okay.
It was in the brief, but
I-
it wasn't in my.
Yeah, I was flowing it, and I know that a large part of your guys' debate was knocking holes into that, which was great, but I'm sitting here like, when did you guys talk about it? So for me, that was kind of, okay, you dedicated a large part of your debate to something that might have been in the brief, but I don't have the brief in front of me, so it's difficult for me to say, okay, I understand that I want to grant adherence to that if you guys didn't state, which I believe Malik pointed out. Oh, and then Ricard had a really good counterpoint that I don't believe was addressed. He said, okay, well, a model from 2013 predicted an increase in X. 3 years later, that increase happened. So that was like, okay, that goes directly against the point you guys stated and didn't bring it back up. And then I think just a critique overall, I know both sides had said something like, oh, it's cited in my brief. Oh, the link is there. Oh, I already cited it. I don't have the brief in front of me, and even though you guys have checked each other's websites, I haven't. So we're ultimately the ones who decide who wins or who we vote for. So it would be more effective if you said, yeah, it's cited here, let me read you the statistics. Or let me put that back in my next rebuttal or my next counterpoint, if that makes sense.
Yeah, Danielle makes a good point. I'm the only one who's sitting here staring at the briefs, and that's why I insist you orally say Professor Jones from the Google Institute at Stanford included in 2017. So we have a better idea of what's going on. Yes, please.
Do judges get briefs?
No.
Like in real debates?
No.
Okay.
No, they just, it's up to the students to cite their evidence if they have it.
Hi everyone, I'm Trish.
Hi, Trish.
I thought both teams did a great job with this debate, and it was difficult for me to choose. I thought both teams were organized, and I was able to follow very well. And all the speakers enunciated their words very clearly, and that really helped. Instead of just like staring at paper, like I thought Mal did a good job with her eye contact and rephrasing her sources, or reading a quote and explaining it in her own words without looking at her paper. And I thought Serena did well with the enunciation, saying her words very clearly, and I was able to follow. I was torn because the opposition had a lot more recent sources, but the affirmative had a lot more diverse sources, from what I heard. I ultimately voted affirmative, though, because I went with what I remembered. And I thought the opposition spent a lot of time on the IPCC, which I appreciate, but also it would help me more if they addressed their other points, which had scientific background. That's what I relied on the most in making my decision.
Okay, thank you.
Hi, Pratik.
Hi, Pratik.
I voted for the opposition, and even for me, it was a very close debate overall. But the reason why I went for the opposition was, again, coming back to the criteria of reasonable doubt. I think Serena and William were both able to present rather the contention that the research is not fully conducted, or there are some still holes left within while conducting that overall research. And I think that point was to a good degree concrete enough to say why something might not be necessarily imminent, as opposed to it being saying like it's a speculative thing, it's not something that is a certainty as side government is saying. Having said that, I really like the overall cross-examination that took place from the affirmative side, because they were really able to poke holes within the evidence that everyone had, that opposition had necessarily presented. Just one overall remark for everyone would be to make the cross-examination questions more succinct and short, just to make sure that you can get through a lot more questions, as opposed to having like a 20-second question and then expecting like a a 2-second answer, because then you're just wasting time at the end of the day. So
Yeah, and if you have a close-ended question, as the article by Professor Kamaker and I suggested, then you'll get a yes or no answer, and you can ask more questions rather than let them ramble on, which you don't want to do. I agree though, I like the focus of the affirmative cross-ex questions, that you guys went out and did the research and looked like you were ready to get them, and that looked good. You looked like you had them, and that looked good. That was impressive. Yes, please.
Hi, I'm Kiara.
Hi, Kiara.
So I voted for the negative, and like everyone said, I had a really hard time choosing. I thought both sides did a really good job. I was hoping to base my decision off of statistics and valuable statistics, but I thought both sides did a really good job of providing really valuable statistics. So ultimately what convinced me to vote for the negative was, as Christina said, people had said also, was just the doubt in my head, the potential doubt that hurricanes are not, consequences of global warming. It was just because I wanted to believe, I personally believe that the affirmative, my personal beliefs are following the affirmative, but you guys did a really good job of changing my mind, which I didn't think was gonna happen, so, yeah.
Hi, my name is Brett.
Hi, Brett.
So I think everyone did a great job. I didn't think there was any weak links. I think everyone did great eye contact, and particularly Serena, her voice was demanded attention and seemed very confident, which to me was a good thing. Was very passionate and confident, and I just almost wanted to hear her words, what was next. Also I think Ricard, while being cross-examined, I liked that he almost anticipated the questions beforehand. It seemed like he knew what they were gonna ask, which showed preparation. And I enjoyed that. I didn't mind when he said certain things it's cited in my brief, because sometimes if you don't have information directly in front of you, if you have to fumble through your brief, that can make it seem like you're not prepared. So unless you have it right in front of you and can say it offhand, then maybe just saying cited in my brief just is a better alternative.
Then fumbling, taking a lot of time, and not having any good answers.
Right. I also enjoyed how when he cross-examined, when he said line evidence or line whatever, that didn't bother me too much, because just watching his face, it looked like he was trying to think of a word, and then just that one just popped into his mind 2 seconds later.
That's a very accurate way of describing evidence.
So it didn't look like his intent was to call him a liar or to say that the evidence was lying. It just looked like he was looking for a word, and that one just came out. So I judged really a person's character by their intent, not necessarily the words necessarily. So I really enjoyed how the opposition poked holes and attacked the affirmative by you saying the models are incorrect or can be incorrect. And when the affirmative said that pretty much their evidence was mostly based on models, and then Ricard said that pointed out that some tornadoes were projected to increase, and the model was correct. But then he said, quote, "The majority of projections are on our side," and majority does not meet my burden of proof. So his admission pretty much that some projections do not project correctly caused me to not think that they provided the burden of proof, and led me to vote for the opposition.
Great, thank you so much, very good. Okay, well, do you debaters have anything you'd like to say after having conducted this debate and received the feedback? What do you want to say?
I think the fact that so many people repeated that it was really tough and that there's a lot of clash means that we did really well, right?
I think so, yeah, and, I think there were compliments for all of you. I liked him saying he liked your voice, and I liked, it's nice, you don't wanna just hear, negative stuff about yourself. And, I also think that, the fact that it was so close and you did check each other's research, and with the exception of one person that you all did really attempt to do the 4 steps of reputation, was the best I'd seen. And I give that to, I thank the leader for goosing your members and reminding them that they do it and they do it repeatedly. So thank you for that, Serena. I appreciate that. So our work is done. Return with honor. Be reading your text. You're going to get a final soon.
Professor Miller.
After all of our debates, we all
Turn it off.
Turn it off now.
Just hit it, yeah.